Okay, here we are at Marble Arch, as you might have guessed. I'm going to talk about Extinction Rebellion in this video, because their last camp is here, and I'm going to wander around Hyde Park a bit.
System change, not climate change.
There they are, so let's have a look.
Okay, okay.
They're out there blocking the road as well. Don't know if that bit's being allowed, I mean officially. non-violent first aid. Well, that's lucky. So Greta Thunberg was here yesterday, and there's somebody giving a speech here today.
We were to introduce an escalating global carbon tax. We would have all the accepted reasons for a rapid, efficient move from fossil fuels to clean technology. It's the politics. Our economy has globalized. Our impact on the environment has globalized. But our politics remain stubbornly and even increasingly national. I have a friend, Ian, who is a professor of planetary science, and he puts it like this. If we were to find an alien planet that had problems like we do today, the best solution for them would not be to divide the population into 200 competing countries and then add a sprinkling of nuclear weapons and radical ideologies. You can't solve global problems with national politics. We can solve problems by choosing representatives to talk to each other and find their solution. That's how it's always
So there you are. I'm going to wander around the park now a bit. Just a random walk, and I'm going to talk randomly about the subject as well a bit, as and when ideas come to me. This is Hyde Park Corner, or actually Speaker's Corner. Hyde Park Corner is down there a long way, the other corner of the park, I think. So I'll say I'm basically in favour of what they're trying to do. I'm not a climate change skeptic. I remember being taught in physics at school how this was like 40 years ago, I should think, maybe more. I'm quite old. About how carbon dioxide was a greenhouse gas, and it was known even then, just from the basic physics of it, if you put a bit more in the atmosphere, it's going to have some effects. Obviously some of it gets absorbed into the ocean, it's not as powerful as you might think at first sight. And there are other obfuscating variables, but we can all see that the climate is changing, which happens naturally from time to time. There have been warm spells even in the last few thousand years that have been warmer than it is now. But the difference then was it was nothing to do with us, whereas this time we can do something about it. Civilizations fell in the past when climate change changed their ability to grow certain crops. This time we think we have some control over it. I suppose it remains to be tested, and of course politically it's practically impossible, or almost impossible, without people like Extinction Rebellion over there actually trying and hopefully succeeding in drawing enough political attention to the cause. Because politicians, of course, are full of rubbish goodwill phrases and kicking the can down the road. But if the scientists are correct, we're talking about the vast majority of scientists in this field, not just the few that are paid for by the United Nations. And if we include also the scientists who are paid for by Exxon and companies like that, who told their own companies 20 years ago and more the fossil fuel industry would lead to this, then we actually do have to do something, or suffer the consequences, of course. The universe is a bit of an open-ended game like that. Just to give an idea of our impact, we know that the world's average temperature has gone up by about 1 degree already. And it's probably going to be impossible to stop it going up by at least 2 degrees altogether. But we also are facing a mass extinction caused by our need to feed ourselves, combined with corporate greed and lack of education causing too much breeding and so on in much of the world, and a whole lot of problems all joined together. But there are some stats that stick in my mind. I don't know if you saw the David Attenborough programme. I'll try and stick a link to it. Many of these things were mentioned there one way or another. I suppose the BBC in their wisdom might lock that video away behind a geofence or something, but you can probably find it somewhere online, I'm sure. But for instance, the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, one third of it has bleached in the last 3 years alone. So at that rate, it'll all be dead within another 6. And Australia is still exporting coal because they need the money, apparently. So if you take the mass of all the mammals on the planet, that's essentially their weight, where mammals are animals whose females provide milk for offspring. So, all the cows, giraffes, humans, lions, tigers, polar bears, all that sort of animal, including also some outliers like whales and dolphins, strangely enough, and all the marsupials in Australia, kangaroo, duck-billed platypus and what have you. You take the total weight of all the mammals on Earth, and it turns out that 70% of that consists of humans and our livestock. If you take the mass of all the birds on the planet, which are not mammals, so birds are not mammals because they don't produce milk, they produce eggs, okay, among other things, but 75% of the mass of all birds on the planet are broiler chickens. So I don't know if you're starting to get the picture here about how much we are over-exploiting the planet. In the David Attenborough programme, which was broadcast last Thursday at the time of recording, they also show satellite images showing parts of the world that are suffering deforestation. And of course it was huge amounts of the world everywhere. Bit of a shame, really. I mean, we have to provide for ourselves, and we know that with current efforts, population of the world is probably going to peak at around 11 billion and then start declining. However, we may not have time for that to happen in a smooth way, because one of the other stats was, or not really a stat, but a map, showed areas of the world that computer models predict will suffer from more and more extreme droughts over the next 20 years. In fact, over the next 10 years, actually, it was up to 2030. And it showed that these areas were, in fact, all of the world's major agricultural production areas. In other words, we're likely to be facing major famines, in fact, biblical scale famines, possibly within a decade. This puts literally billions of people's lives at direct risk. It may be that only one or two areas, major regions, will suffer at a time, but they could all come together. It could be like every 2 or 3 years. You can see there's a population crash coming. So yeah, something has to be done, and quickly. I mean, the government will say, hey, look, 40% of all our energy is produced sustainably now in the UK because of the massive investment in wind farms and some solar and some tidal and some nuclear power. What everyone thinks of it. But it's not actually so simple, because a lot of our production has been outsourced abroad. So over that period, our carbon output has actually continued to increase, if you count the production which has been sent to China and places like that. So in a way, nothing's been done really. And certainly not enough. Really, I should be on strike with them there, but I've got to think about my job. They've been criticised for being largely white middle class, which I think is a racist slur, but it's also technically correct. They're people with some spare time. But I would say, if they managed to call a general strike, which involved the trades unions and a large degree of public support, then I would feel okay about leaving my job at least one day a week to join them. Or stay at home and play Civilization, I don't know. Whatever, while the electricity lasts. I can hear a ring-necked parakeet somewhere. Of course, I haven't even mentioned the insect apocalypse. I don't know the numbers for that though, but large numbers of insects are dying off, probably because of farming methods, pesticides. If you know the numbers, stick them in the comments. I was reading today about, I think it's, what's it called? Was it Strike magazine or something like that? Stickler, I think. A supposedly Trotskyist magazine, but it's actually funded by the Koch brothers, who are American multi-billionaires, worth about $120 billion between the two of them. Or two or more, I don't know actually. In other words, that they're worth more than Bill Gates between them. So actually, they're saying things which are compatible with what right-wing extremist fascists believe. And they've been doing a hit piece on Greta Thunberg, the Swedish girl, basically laughing about her being an Asperger's person. Because I guess they have no argument, so let's start attacking the person. In a way, it's a good sign. What was it Mahatma Gandhi said? First of all, they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. I would add you might lose as well, but you won't know until you get to that end stage. And the reason Extinction Rebellion's disruptive activity is necessary is not just because of the scale and urgency of the crisis, but because we know that the authorities have developed this tactic of ignoring protests. Oh yes, you have a right to protest, and then they do nothing. We've had protests with hundreds of thousands of people, even 1 million people at times, and absolutely nothing whatsoever has changed as a result. So conventional protests are a bit of a waste of time. It may draw people's or politicians' attention to it when there's an election due, but it doesn't really result in substantive change. And that's what's needed. It's the bluebell season here in London. And there's some white bells, whatever they're called. There's actually different species of bluebells. I think these might be the Spanish ones, which are kind of taking over a bit. from the natives. So yes, I feel disruptive activity is necessary because nobody's going to listen otherwise, and the wealthy know that they are pretty much going to be insulated from all the hassle. And we know from experience that politicians don't have a clue how ordinary people live, because they are all, pretty much all anyway, wealthy. Oops. Just zapping the microphone there, I hope it's still working. And of course the super duper rich, the billionaires, seem to be sociopathic and absolutely obsessed with money. I mean, why would the Koch brothers, who are worth 120 billion, be financing lunatic right-wing groups? And they finance ideas that everybody should be able to influence politics, but not equally according to their means, which of course favours themselves enormously because they've got vast sums of money at their disposal. And it is a fascist idea. It's the idea that some people are better than others. And that some people matter and the masses do not. So I think we need to adapt the capitalist system. I don't think we're going to be able to get rid of it. It's almost a force of nature. The idea of trade is something that's really deep in the human psyche, I suspect. We know people were doing this from long before recorded history. But we can tweak the company rules, for example. We can make it so that as well as having a duty to their shareholders, companies have a duty to the environment and to the general well-being. And this, at the moment, is only a moral duty, which obviously these people have no morals. So we should make it a legal duty. And the directors should be personally liable for failing to keep up with it. Something like that would actually make quite a big difference, I think. But maybe not quickly enough still, I don't know. If it was implemented quickly and enforced rigorously very rapidly, maybe. But they would do things in other countries which are not subject to the law and get around it and so on. So it would have to be a bit like the same way if you go abroad to Thailand and like Gary Glitter and molest underage women, you're still subject to British law. Of course, we have to get Trump and co to cooperate with all this. So I suppose we don't have to, they can be left behind. But we also have to assist the poorer countries like China who are actually spending a lot of money on sustainable development, despite the fact they're building zillions of coal-fired power stations at the moment. They're also spending a lot on sustainability and solar power, trying to do a conversion. These are coots, by the way, the blackbirds. I notice in London that we have these massive, only a few compared with cities in America, but a few massive tower blocks or towers, office blocks, like the Shard and the Gherkin and the Leadenhall Tower and others. And the lights are on all night. The Walkie-Talkie Tower is another one. Nobody in there but the security guards and the cleaners maybe. That's a moorhen. Dodgy place to have a nest, I would say. But... And why are the lights all on all night when nobody's there? Some of the offices where I work all winter have been heated to 24 degrees Celsius, 73 degrees Fahrenheit. Completely unnecessary. 21 will be plenty, people can wear a jumper. I've complained about it to no effect, but there you go, at least I've complained. golden eye ducks. I suppose in my reluctance to strike, I'm in the same position as most people. I mean, a substantial proportion of the population would roughly favour doing something about the climate crisis, I suppose. But nobody wants to be the first to quit or lose their job or even stick their neck out. We've been well trained to be obedient workers. And not many people even ask questions or try to think about it. Because the regimentation and training at school teaches people that thinking is painful. Don't think for yourself, just repeat what you've been told and you'll pass the exams and get a good job. Well, you might pass the exams, but there are not that many good jobs around. Let's face it. We have jobs, some of them are better than others. Mine is not bad. But this day in, day out, work thing doesn't work for me, really. Gets me some income. More ringneck parakeets. What's this thing then? Henry Moore, presumably. The arch. Derived from a fragment of bone and enlarged from a small model only a few centimetres high, the arch is an example of how Moore regularly drew inspiration from natural objects such as pebbles, bones and shells. Blah-de-blah-de-blah. So there you go. Well, there's something going on, isn't there? Ambulances, I think. I know there's rumours that the Extinction Rebellion camp at Marble Arch will be moved on today, but there's nothing's happened as yet by the looks of it. I suppose they might be moved off the roads. Well, what do you think? What do you think is the best move for people with jobs who want to keep them? Join up at the weekends or something? It's not disruptive enough, is it? I don't know. Strictly speaking, we should all go on strike until something is done, but that's completely impractical because we know very well that nearly everybody won't do it. European blackbird.
Søn, der var ved at blive vred. Let me wait there.
I guess that's it for today. See you in another video. Bye for now.
Same Venice. Oh, Venice, yeah.
On every level, cultural level, economic level, there's always something.
It's a bit like, because when you're on the building site, they don't have girls. You've got literally